Hey everyone, welcome to the Option Series live stream on the ESS Twitch channel. We've got a really wonderful program for you tonight. Skyping in live from Buffalo, New York, we have Steve Baczkowski. We are going to be seeing some pieces that he put together for tonight, recording himself live in some scenic Buffalo spaces. So without any further ado, I'm just going to introduce the first clip here from Steve Baczkowski. But yeah, really excited for tonight and can't wait to see
Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's roll that first clip, and Steve and I will be back in a little bit to discuss his work.
Oh, shit, I can't hear you.
That explains it. Okay.
There we go.
Classic video conferencing age mute button
Yes.
on situation. Welcome back. We've got Steve Baczkowski in live from Buffalo here. First of all, wanted to thank you for just recording these amazing pieces for this broadcast tonight, and for joining us to chat about them. I guess my first question is if you could describe your process in preparing these pieces for tonight. What thought went into, obviously the space is a big component in the video tonight. But if you want to talk about just how you kind of went about recording these and approaching them. I guess my first question is,
Yes.
If you could describe your process in preparing these pieces for tonight. What thought went into?
Well, I'm having a weird experience where I'm hearing the last two things you said layered on top of it.
Very
kind of
delayed extra audio. Yeah.
Let me see what I. All right, that's better.
There we go.
Yes. Sorry. First of all, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the decision to go to the grain elevators came about basically because, because once we had made the decision to pre-record some pieces. Sorry, I'm having a weird experience where I'm hearing. Oh boy, now what we said 5 minutes ago is coming up again in my. I'm so sorry. I just downloaded Skype today, so this is a new. So basically, I've been playing in the grain elevator since I was a kid, and since I was going to pre-record and play solo, I thought, why not bring a little piece of Buffalo to the situation, and just to bring in another element that I could work off of. Because as it is, playing solo is a challenge, but playing solo without an audience is even more of a challenge. So by putting myself in the context of the grain elevators, there was a lot. First of all, the environment there is very intense. It's not a legal place to go to. There are people around that wander through. There's on one side is the Buffalo River, and on the other side is a train, a bunch of train tracks, and so there's all sorts of things going on while you're in there, and it just, you're never quite at ease in that space. and it has a really strong presence, and of course the reverberation is a real factor. So I just thought it would be a way to give me kind of the illusion of having an audience, so I could kind of get into a space where I was really playing and kind of exploring some things, and feeling like I was engaged, and also responding to the environment.
Totally. Yeah, especially with solo playing, I've always found that the space makes such a huge. It just dictates so much, and whatever. At least when I've done it, what I'm gonna work on and what I'm gonna use in my performance. The space is always like a huge component of that. Whether it's a really wet, reverberant space or a really dry one, it gives you an idea of like what stuff is gonna work, right? So
Yeah.
I guess from a playing perspective, we were talking a little bit earlier. I think maybe a component of it also was like you didn't maybe bring as many toys as you might bring if were playing in a different space or were playing under different circumstances. So I guess did also the act of having to kind of make a destination out of the space you performed in impact or dictate anything about how you approached your playing for the performance?
Well, certainly, I'm sorry, I'm still hearing the things that I just said while I'm hearing you talk. So it's, I'm trying to pick out what you're saying while also hearing what I just said. And I'm not quite sure how to remedy that.
It could be the audio from the broadcast normally has a couple, like 30-second delay or so. So if you can find the Twitch...
you know what? I see what I did. Okay. I figured it out. Oh, thank God.
There we go.
Yes. All right. I still had the other website open. And so I was hearing the delay. Got it. Now I can hear you clearly.
It's like we're in the grain elevators all over again.
Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, they're fascinating places. It's like they're like our ruins, our ancient ruins in Buffalo, and they're massive structures, and they're too expensive to tear down, and so they just sit there. And this place is kind of amazing because you can just wander in. I mean, there are no trespassing signs here or there, but you can just sort of wander in. So they've become spaces that have been utilized, I think, by artists and miscreants, and they're just kind of there for using. So, and the obviously the fact that the sound has an opportunity to live longer than it normally does in most spaces, there's an element that you can tap into. So, I mean, over the years, I kind of developed an approach where, like in that first piece, for instance, I wasn't in the most resonant space. I wasn't in one of the cylinders itself. I was in a kind of a hall, and the cylinders are closed off and they're up above me. So there was some resonance, but it's not that dramatic. So it kind of allowed me to work with more melodic material. And, at the end there, my can mute fell out of my bell. And so I sort of went into a different territory. And in the more reverberant spaces, the more notes you play, the more dense it gets. I kind of adjusted my playing. You'll see in the next piece where I'm really working with harmonics, multiphonics, and overtones, and letting them live in the space and trying to create more layers of sound. And it also gave me an opportunity to sort of focus on the baritone in particular, which has always been really my primary instrument. But I play almost as much tenor these days, and I like to play a lot of different instruments. And one of the instruments that has really influenced my playing was learning to play the didgeridoo, when I was in high school and early in college, and really focusing on the malleability of a single frequency and how much sound there is in a single note. And after some time, I was able to transfer the techniques that I developed playing didgeridoo to the saxophone. So it was really conducive to playing in highly reverberant spaces. Although I do like to play a lot of different instruments, and I learn from a lot of different instruments, it was nice to kind of just focus on the baritone for this. and just try to highlight, that particular aspect of my music.
Absolutely. Was the choice to kind of center a lot of your work around the baritone specifically, did that come about before or after your time studying didgeridoo? Because there's definitely a lot of like acoustic commonality between the instruments of.
It was before,
Mhm.
because I switched to baritone when I was pretty young, because I had the longest fingers in the saxophone section. So my teacher said, "You're going to be playing this year," and I didn't even know what a baritone was at the time, and it was big and it was shiny, and I said, "Yeah, sure." But as I progressed, I came to enjoy. Basically the lower frequencies, because a soprano can't go as low as a baritone, but a baritone can go as high as a soprano. So the range of the instrument really attracted me, and just the presence of the lower frequencies. Um, and then later on, I enjoyed sort of the exclusive nature of the baritone. I mean, there's so many tenor and alto players that I could sort of hide away in my little baritone world, where there's much fewer players that specialized in the horn. So in those early years when I was judging myself more, there was less to judge against than all these great tenor and alto players that I was inundated with. So yeah, and then I sometime early in college I became a bit disenchanted with the saxophone because of those kinds of reasons. The way you're brought to the music through academia, and the way music is taught in a mostly functional way. I kind of drifted away from the horn and got interested in the didgeridoo, for instance, because I didn't have to use my fingers. I didn't have to think about chords. I didn't have to think about scales or anything like that. I could just focus on sound and develop my embouchure and develop my awareness of harmonics and those kinds of things. And also playing simple instruments like a bamboo flute with 6 holes, where you play what the instrument wants to play, and not have to be able to do everything with it. It sort of has its song. And eventually I was able to bring that back to the saxophones, where I didn't conceive of them as this particular type of instrument. I just conceived of them as another medium for producing sound, through wind.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear. I mean, especially because I liked what you said earlier about how people think of the baritone as an instrument that has a lower range than all of the other wind
Right.
instruments in the family, but it's more of a breadth of that harmonic series that you can get, right?
Yes.
So there's no reason you can't be jumping up into upper partials and being able to expose all of that up there, but you have just a wider range that you're able
Yes.
to explore, and specifically in the context of working with the didge, also, which is an instrument that is super like not line oriented at all. You can't really play lines
Right.
on a didgeridoo. It's all the harmonic series.
Right.
And yeah, I never knew that about your background, but it makes sense about the way that you're able to isolate different frequencies, and really kind of expose whole ranges of the frequency
And also
spectrum.
using the voice. When you play didgeridoo, obviously you produce one frequency with your lips, but one of the essential components of that instrument is adding the voice. So it's not just like a extended technique; it's a fundamental technique of the instrument. So having two frequencies relating simultaneously, and then having a physical experience of the tiniest of intervals, you really
Mhm.
feel the smallest micro intervals when you're using your voice against what your lips are producing. Uh, and so that was also very helpful. And then when you are exploring the higher registers of the instrument, there's this sort of under resonance that the baritone has that, to me, sort of made it a little more palatable. It wasn't just this kind of shrieking high frequency. There was sort of an under presence to the sound that I was attracted to too. It sort of allowed me to go into those higher territories and feel like I was still, I could still be pretty,
Absolutely. And there's so much. I'm thinking more about the acoustics of the baritone, and it's fascinating me. But just the way that if you're playing a really low fundamental frequency on the baritone, it's not just that you have this like enormous range of fundamental frequencies that you can play, but when you're playing any note at all, you're getting all of these different waves in one that's making up that complex,
Yes.
waveform that you're creating. And something about low instruments, and particularly the baritone over just about any other instrument, you really hear those things separated out in a really clear way a lot of times.
Yes.
And I think that's always something that sonically is really fascinating and enthralling to me about the baritone. And also you mentioned with the didge having your sort of vocal frequency and then your buzzing frequency or whatever it is on the instrument, and then also that third frequency that then is created between the two, which is
exactly,
I'm sure, a really physical thing to kind of experience when you're playing that instrument, even more than being able to pick it out as you're listening to someone else do it.
Well, and that was one of the attractions too of the silos themselves, because they really allow you to highlight those aspects of the sound because they live longer. They have a presence, and if you're playing in a dead room, you'll lose that information pretty quickly. So going in the silos, it was almost like a way of putting a magnifying glass on an area of sonic exploration that I have indulged quite a bit, and this kind of brought it out. And you'll hear what I wanted to do was to play different pieces in different locations within the grain elevators. So that first piece was kind of in an open area, and you probably saw at the end I was distracted because there was some CSX employees outside trying to figure out what I was doing in there, and eventually they left me alone. So the second piece, I actually go into one of the cylinders. So you'll see I'm standing basically inside a cone at the base of a 120-foot cylinder that's probably about 25 feet in diameter. So it's a massive reverb, and it's probably, as far as man-made structures on Earth, it's got to be one of the most extreme acoustic environments you could play in. But I didn't want to do this whole thing with just that environment because it's very extreme. But it has a drama to it that is like no other space I've ever experienced, because the sound really lives for maybe 15 or 20 seconds before it dies away. So all of those tiny sounds that normally are just gone right away, they live for some time, and so you can kind of focus in on that area of the instrument. And even though I might be playing a very intense, a loud, dynamic sound, I'm actually working a very subtle and delicate area of the instrument. So it has this kind of dichotomy where you're playing very, very intense, but the area of sound you're working is very delicate, So I like that kind of presence. It's almost like, with an electric guitar, I've heard guitarists say, like, I have to crank my amp up all the way so that I could get all of these subtle frequencies. I'm not just trying to be loud, I'm actually trying to, manipulate this area of sound, so it feels very similar.
Absolutely. Well, now that you've warmed us up for this big cylinder piece, let's pivot back to the performance here and hear this second piece. Once again, this is Steve Baczkowski from Buffalo, New York. Also, just want to mention, if anyone has any questions that come to them while watching this performance, you can throw your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can before the night's over. But yeah, let's bring it back to clip 2 from Steve Baczkowski. All right, welcome back. We're here with Steve Baczkowski from Buffalo. Uh, yeah, you weren't kidding about the reverberation on that grain silo. It's pretty crazy stuff. Getting a
It's
full
very
20 second or so tail. Um, and I think there was a lot of talk in the chat just about how you were able to use that as really an instrument in and of itself. One thing that was super fascinating to me was like directionally speaking, when you prepare to play in a normal performing space, you're pointed in one direction towards some humans, hopefully, who are there to watch you play. But being in a space like that where you can point in any direction, you're going to get a different reaction from the building is a pretty wild thing to witness. I know there was a question in the chat somewhere about where the microphone was placed as you were recording that one.
Well, in this case, I stood in the center of the cylinder, and there's a metal cone that's sort of around me that's mostly decayed, which made it possible for me to just walk in and stand under it. Normally, you'd have to kind of crawl in the manhole-size opening from underneath, but that particular silo is so rotted out that I could stand there in the center of the cylinder, and the camera was just about 15 feet away. And in the next piece, I decided I had a little time left, and I hadn't played any tenor, so I decided to do a piece with the tenor, and I actually put the camera underneath the silo. And so the camera is right underneath the cylinder and is hearing the reverb, but I'm outside of the cylinder. So you get more of a direct sound from the horn, but you still hear the reverb from the camera's perspective. So it's a little less dramatic, but still has this similar effect.
Fantastic. So before we're done chatting tonight, I did want to ask you a little bit about just your life and your work in Buffalo. I know you have worked at Hall Walls for many, many years, and also just the sort of, I'm always fascinated by the network of folks, whether it's in Ithaca or Buffalo or Western Mass. There's kind of like a collection of really amazing improvisers and noise artists who are kind of spread out throughout the Northeast. Obviously, New York City, there's a million amazing performers and players there, but specifically the areas, to the north and east, or in your case, west, but just all over the place that are, tour together a lot, or, it seems like there's a really strong, at least when live performance was a thing, there was a lot of interplay between those different cities and communities. So if you could,
well, one of the nice things about being in Buffalo, and one of the reasons I chose to stay here after college was, well, for one, I got a job at Hall Walls. So that allowed me to sort of have access to people that I wanted to learn from, and also allowed me to share that with my community. And Buffalo is sort of well situated in the sense that we're kind of halfway between New York and Chicago. Then Toronto's to the north, and Detroit and Philly and Pittsburgh. And, we're you sort of have to pass through Buffalo, like you can't avoid it, and so I think I benefited from that in the sense that I was able to, or I've been able to be a host for a lot of musicians, either through Hall Walls or on my own. And that allowed me to have a relationship with a larger community. And Buffalo itself has a very rich music and art community. We're kind of a city and a small town at the same time. And Buffalo has a certain grandeur of a city that was once quite wealthy and really well designed, with lots of beautiful infrastructure and architecture. And it's since fallen in to decline, by some perspective, to be one of the poorest cities in the country, which is part of why I can wander into a structure like the silos without anybody bothering me and do this kind of shit. So it was always attractive for me to stay in Buffalo because I was able to sort of participate in the broader scene without having to leave Buffalo. And I could still live cheap in a huge warehouse apartment and, more or less subsist doing my nonprofit part-time administrative work and my random gigs, playing music that I was interested in playing as opposed to music that was maybe more profitable. So it allowed me to develop in a way where I didn't have a lot of pressure to move in any direction other than what felt natural to me. And it also allowed me to invite musicians that I wanted to learn from. And it was nice because I could sort of be selfish in a way, where it's like, well, I would really love to, learn from this particular musician. But then I could also have the benefit of sharing that experience with the community. And it's worked well for me because I play with a lot of people in Buffalo, and of course I've hosted a lot of musicians over the years. I mean, at this point, some 500 or 600 concerts over the last 20 years, and a lot of artist residencies where I would invite someone like Roscoe Mitchell or Butch Morris or Wadada Leo Smith to come and spend a week in Buffalo and work with Buffalo musicians. And you could really absorb a lot of information that way, where you're not just playing a gig, you're having breakfast, you're, going to the schools, you're dealing with more mundane things, and you learn a lot from those kinds of experiences. But then I would also inevitably encounter musicians that I felt a natural inclination to work with. And so I was able to develop personal musical relationships outside of the ones that I have in Buffalo, which of course are near and dear to me. The one thing about Buffalo is, it's a very rich music scene, but there's not a lot of players, it's not like going to New York where there's 20 different trombone players, that might be available, or it's a little leaner in Buffalo, which is nice because it feels very much like a personal kind of relationship that develops. Like you have to work with each other. You don't have a choice, and so you develop something that's very personal. But then by the same token, sometime in around 2002, I think, when Chris Corsano and Paul Flaherty came to town and played, it was, immediately apparent to me that these were people somehow of the same ilk, and that it made sense to work together. And that's happened a lot for me over the years. So I've been able to maintain these kinds of relationships outside of Buffalo. I mean, most recently when Brandon Lopez came to town, Brandon.
Shout out, Brandon.
Again, it was one of these things where it was like, yeah, this, I don't even need to cultivate this. It's already there. And so, it has its pros and cons, being in a smaller community. It's a bit of an outlier kind of way to pursue this path. But it's worked very well for me and for my nature. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Totally. And I want to hone in for a moment. I guess it's kind of probably an obvious dynamic, but when you're organizing a lot of performances and bringing people through town, and you're in touch with folks in other cities who are on tour and coming through, and you develop relationships with those folks, and then obviously when you're the one out on tour and you get to see your buddies somewhere else, there's definitely like a codependent, maybe is not the best word, but a kind of give and a take between being an organizer and a performer at the same time. How do you feel like those worlds for you interact with each other and inform each other?
I mean, it's a real pain in the ass, but it's a great pain in the ass to have,
Yeah.
Because you have to kind of work on a lot of different levels. And I've never been a particularly adept administrator. I'm just so absorbed in the music, and I have a lot of relationships, so I'm able to kind of work from that. And because of an organization like Hall Walls and the infrastructure that we have and the people that we have there, we kind of pool our talents and our resources so that we can all work together towards that. So, I mean, somehow I've kept this going all this time. But I have a hard time, keeping all lines of communication going and being able to support and promote other musicians, and at the same time trying to do the same thing for myself. And it's a bit of a balancing act, but I think all in all, I've been able to make it work in a positive way for me. But yeah, sometimes you can feel like the administrative aspect of being a curator, a presenter, can take over. But again, I mean, I found a way to just kind of focus my energies, and I've had the good fortune to have so many extraordinary people in this community that make it possible, where I could still be a musician as, my prime efforts and my prime energy, but also support the local and the national and global community, and providing a space and to be able to create an environment where musicians can do their best work, to be able to do that. And it gives you a different understanding of how complex the process of maintaining this lifestyle is for us all.
Absolutely. Yeah, and how delicate that balance can be, as we've seen
Absolutely.
now over the last, 6, 7, 8 months. Before we roll that last clip, I just wanted to ask, what you've got coming up, any recordings that I know you've released some recent trio recordings, but any, exciting things upcoming, or maybe just more generally how you're rolling with the punches with the pandemic lately, and
yeah, I mean,
that's brought about.
At first it was, there were so many things that were planned. I had a really ambitious concert series that was underway, and some partnerships and projects that were all just kind of wiped clean. And I had some gigs that were that I was really looking forward to, and all of a sudden, all of it was gone at once, and which was terrible and difficult, and at the same time a relief. It was just like, after 20 years, I don't have to think about the next gig or the next concert or the next show or the next grant. And so I kind of refocused my efforts on just dealing with things at home. So that was good. And I didn't play for a while. I didn't practice much, except for playing, like, my pocket instruments and my little carry-along things. I kind of took a break from the horn for almost a month, and that was somehow helpful. When I, jumped back in full tilt, I felt like I had progressed somehow, So that was nice. And, one of the ways we dealt with not being able to perform was to just get together in a public park with a couple of people, in particular, my longtime collaborator and dear friend, percussionist Ravi Padmanabha. He's a great instigator, and just like, hey, let's get together today in the park and play. And so I had these nice experiences where I would get together with a group of people in a public park and be sort of, exposed but not performing, and to participate in people walking their dog or jogging or having a picnic or whatever they were doing, and to be involved but not to be the sort of point. And that was great. And so then once kind of the dust settled, I started to get back to work. And Ravi Padmanabha and we've been playing as a duo now for over 20 years, and we just put together an LP of duo improvisations, covering a wide range of instrumental combinations of percussion and wind, because we both like to dabble in lots of different instruments. And so we made a record on Ravi's label, Good Karma, Bad Karma Records. There's a limited edition LP with original artwork by the great Bill Nace. And that has just been released in physical form and on Bandcamp as well. It's available for download. Just prior to that, the fantastic Kevin Riley at Relative Pitch Records released a trio recording of a live trio of myself with Brandon Lopez on bass and Chris Corsano on drums. That's called Old Smoke, and that came out last year on Relative Pitch. And Chris Corsano and Bill Nace and I also released an LP on Nace's label, Open Mouth Records, called Mystic Beings. And that's floating out there in its various forms. And then we have an upcoming CD on Relative Pitch, the Brandon Lopez Trio Quartet with Cecilia Lopez and Gerald Cleaver, and that I believe is due to be released on Relative Pitch in the coming months. Amazing. So yeah, we've got a few irons in the fire, a few things to keep me getting out of bed in the morning. And Hall Walls has actually been able somehow to maintain a high level of programming. We have a archive concert series called the Sonic Vault that we've been releasing. We commissioned some works, original video works by Nicole Mitchell and Maz Swift and Douglas Ewart. So we were able to kind of, make the transition and keep some things happening. We started doing our own live streams from Hall Wall Cinema, beginning with Ravi Padmanabha solo, and then this Thursday, a great Buffalo musician, pianist, multi-instrumentalist, vocalist Joe Rosler is performing this Thursday through Hall Wall's live stream. So we're going to try to kind of, roll with the punches and keep things going. I mean, it's getting a bit desperate now. But we've been in this situation to some extent before, and we've persevered. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to maintain that level of perseverance. So,
fantastic. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all those new releases and checking out the stream on the Hall Walls website, or wherever those streams are taking place. Definitely.
Yeah, that's hallwalls.org.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, let's roll that final clip tonight. I just want to thank Steve once again for tuning in here and putting together these amazing pieces that he recorded this week. And it was just a joy and an honor to see you again and hear from you. So one more big virtual round of applause for Steve Baczkowski.
Thank you. Well, it's been a delight and a pleasure. It's great to see you and hear you again in almost person. And I really want to extend my deepest gratitude to the great Ken Vandermark, Tim Daisy, and yourself, Andrew, and Alex and Ralph, and everyone at ESS for making this possible. It really helps. And just to have an excuse to put myself through this process has been really fruitful and enjoyable. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share.
Yeah, it's been an honor to hear from you and see you play tonight. So, all right, let's roll that final clip, and we'll be right back here next week, Monday evening, same time, for another great show next week. So take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.